Welcome back, everybody. My name is Hayden Desmond. I'm with Eagle Eye TV, and I'm joined here today by Nathan King of the Plainsman, Harrison Tarr, also of the Plainsman, and Christian Clemente of, you guessed it, the Plainsman. We're going to come around and give you a preview of everything that you can expect from the matchup between the Auburn Tigers and the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Nathan, I'm going to start with you. How do you think that Minnesota's defense can really match up against this Auburn offense?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the big selling point with Minnesota this season has been their unanimous All-American safety, and that's Antoine Winfield, the son of a NFL great, Antoine Winfield, the Vikings guy. He decided to stay home and play in Minneapolis, and he's had a phenomenal season. He leads the Big Ten in interceptions by 5. He's got 9, and the next closest guy has 4. But in terms of their defensive front, if Auburn can get some push in this game, and talking to some Minnesota people this week, if Auburn can get some push up front, establish the running game, I think they're set for a lot of success. Bo Nix hasn't thrown an interception since the LSU game, and Minnesota gets one seemingly every game. They had 14 of them this season, one of the best in the country in that mark. This is also a top 20 defense. A lot of people are saying, well, Auburn, they don't have to play any more LSUs, they don't have to play any more Georgias, any more Floridas in terms of the caliber of defense, but this is a top 20 defense this season. I believe it's top 25, top 30 in S&P plus. So this is no slouch. This is going to be another really big test for Bo Nix, I think.
All right, now I'm going to sort of shift it over to you, Harrison. You're more familiar with the running game of Auburn. How do you see the running game with Boobie Whitlow, with Cam Martin, working in DJ Williams going against that Minnesota D-line?
I actually think that this game's going to be a whole lot different than what we've seen throughout this year. I think that there's a decent chance with Whitlow, a giant question mark, if you will, in terms of health. I think we're going to see Gus Malzahn try to implement DJ Williams a little bit more than he has to this point in the game, and in the season, rather, because he's going to start building toward next year. Malzahn commented earlier in this week when we talked to him in his press conference with PJ Fleck about how this is not just as much about winning 10 games this season as it is building momentum going forward. So it would not surprise me if we saw DJ Williams get more touches than he has all season, and I think the Auburn fan base would be happy to see him get more touches because he is almost the guy of the future for them. So Whitlow obviously will have a role. Still a question mark whether or not he declares for the draft. I think personally, my opinion and my take on that is if he was going to declare, he probably would not be playing this game. So that's also something else to look for. And obviously we know Tank coming in next year, we're going to have a crowded running back room. So it's going to be interesting to see how much work DJ gets. Cam will get some touches because he's a senior. But past that, I think that it's going to be pretty much a two-back shared of the touches.
So, Christian, last question. Derek Brown, obviously the leader of this defense, he decided that, he's a top 5 NFL pick and he's going to back and play. What do you think that says to this Auburn defense and offense that their number 1 guy is coming to play the ball game?
I think this says a lot. It shows that the players really believe in it, even if it's not a national championship, even if it's not a playoff, they want to come back. And other players like Marlon Davidson, Prince Tega Winogo, they came back. They followed Derek and said they wanted to be here, even if it's the Outback Bowl. So I think it really says a lot about the team and the coaching staff, for that matter, too.
All right, we're going to go back to Nathan. Nathan, what do you think that Auburn needs to do to win this game? And give me a score prediction.
Yeah, so Minnesota's got one of the more prolific offenses in the country. They're the only team in the country besides LSU, which we know how good that offense is, to have 2 1,000-yard receivers. Tyler Johnson, who's from the Georgia area, and Rashad Bateman as well. Sophomore quarterback Tanner Morgan's had a phenomenal season for them. They've got a little bit of a mixture at the running game. They like to have some running backs be able to flare out of the backfield, make catches out of the backfield. So it is a prolific offense. If Auburn's going to be able to slow them down, it's going to come with pressuring Morgan. Obviously, Derek Brown and Marlon Davidson have been doing that all season long against elite caliber SEC quarterbacks, but it's a big test for the secondary. It's Daniel Thomas's final game. It's Jeremiah Denson's final game. It's Javaris Davis's final game. Are they going to go out with a bang and shut down these Minnesota receivers? I think that's the number 1 key. Because Auburn has been so great this season tackling in space, but that's not where Minnesota's bread and butter is. Their bread and butter is these chunk plays down the field to Rashad Bateman and Tyler Johnson, and Auburn's been susceptible to some of those this season. So if Auburn can limit that, if we can see that on Saturday or on Wednesday, I think that we're going to see Auburn win that game. Now, if we're talking about the Minnesota side, if they can get some of those plays, it's pretty cold out here. If they can get some of those plays, I believe they've got a really good chance to win. They're a pretty sound team on special teams as well. But yeah, that's the X factor to me, is those chunk plays downfield, and how those senior defensive backs are going to be able to wrap up two of objectively just some of the best receivers in the nation.
All right, Harrison, same question.
Okay, so I'm going to go and to quote PJ Fleck, echo what Nathan was just saying about in terms of the statistical analysis. I agree with what you said, but since you've already covered all the bases that I was going to talk about, I'm going to take a little bit of a philosophical approach, if that's okay with you guys. Minnesota wants to be here. I'm not saying Auburn does not, but Minnesota is very excited to have a 10-win season. PJ Fleck is fired up. He has his guys fired up, and I've heard that they apparently took a team photo with a boat because they've been rowing a boat all year, just saying that could give them an edge, putting that out there. Not actually, but Auburn's going to have to be motivated. And the reason I say this is not just because you're playing on a New Year's Day bowl game, and because it's important to win 10 games in a season. I actually just wrote a piece on this yesterday. This is important going forward. If they have a poor showing against a very talented, as Nathan just said, Minnesota team, it's not going to bode well for them in terms of recruiting. It's not going to bode well for Gus Malzahn in terms of support with the fan base and within the boosters. And if that's not enough motivation underneath them, I don't know what is. They're going to have to want it more than Minnesota, because that team's going to come out swinging, and they're going to come out swinging early. My score prediction, I want to go somewhere with a 31-24 Auburn win. I could see it being 31-21. I have a hard time actually seeing this being a clear double-digit victory. The score could wind up showing not as much of a blowout as it is, but I think it will be closer than the experts think. So, you want me to go and pass this to Christian? Same question. Right over to you, Christian.
Okay. I think what you said, I think the Minnesota players are actually going to want to be here more than Auburn, but I don't think that means that Minnesota's going to come away victorious. I think Minnesota has the great players. They have the pieces to make it work, but they're not going to be able to get through the Auburn defense. I personally think the score is going to be Auburn 34, Minnesota 17. I think it'll be close throughout, but Auburn's going to pull away at the end. Bo Nix is going to continue his streak from pretty much the Ole Miss game. Then he had a good Georgia game. Then he had a good Alabama game, and Samford was in there too. I think he'll throw the ball 40-plus times, and he'll complete it around 30 times without an interception, which will be huge for him going into next season.
Nathan, we missed out on your score prediction.
Yes.
Can I get one?
I was just thinking about that. I'm going to go the same. I believe you did you say 34-21?
I did say 34-21.
34-21 is going to be mine as well. I think it's going to be a close game. I think that'll be kind of a backdoor cover by Auburn. I think that it's going to come down to some key defensive plays at the end of the game. Like I was talking about before, Minnesota's got a really talented offense. Those receivers, it's a great quarterback in Tanner Morgan. I think it's going to take some defensive stops at the end of the game, but I think that's what Auburn has in them. I think Derek Brown and Marlon Davidson are going to make one more stop, maybe a turnover, maybe a stop on fourth down or something like that. At the end of the game, I think it'll come down to that. I think Bo Nix will have a fine game. If Auburn can create some turnovers, I think that's what they're going to do. So I've got it the same, 34-21, Auburn.
All right, last question. Obviously, we've talked about players from both sides. I want your X factor. I want one player from either side that you think is really going to have a big effect on this game.
Yeah, so for me, on Minnesota's side, it's the edge rusher, Carter Coughlin. He's a legacy there. He's had a phenomenal season at that defensive end spot. Auburn has really cleaned up their pass protection this season. I know, it's a much maligned offensive line for them. People have had their complaints about it, but in terms of the pass protection, look, it was Marquel Harrell said that they've only given up 3 or 4 sacks this entire season. Now Auburn's given up something like 16, but he's talking about pass protection sacks that are a direct result of a guy being beaten off the snap by a rusher, by an interior defensive lineman. So they've had a much improved season there. They really need to neutralize Coughlin off the edge. He'll be going against Jack Driscoll or Prince Tega Winogo off the edge there. He's my guy on defense. If they can neutralize him, if maybe Bo Nix reads him a few times on those good inside zone read plays he's been running. And then for Auburn, I think you go to the other side. A guy people have been wanting to see a lot more from is Anthony Schwartz. I think he's not even strictly a receiver. He's just kind of a playmaker in the backfield. You get him moving side from side. I think they're going to really need to get him going because this is a good tackling Minnesota defense, just like Auburn tackles well. This team tackles well in space. If he can get the edge, I think he could really create some plays downfield for them. So, I've got Coughlin and Schwartz as my X factors.
All right. Harrison?
Okay, so if we're talking about on one X factor on each side of the ball, I'm going to continue that trend if that's okay with you, Hayden. Every piece of me wants to hammer down Derek Brown for the defensive side, but I'm not going to. I actually want to take a different approach and say that we're going to have a couple of breakout games from a couple of guys we haven't seen much because that's what happens in bowl games. I actually like Owen Pappo a lot. He's had a strong freshman season, freshman All-American, if I'm not correct, or at least All-SEC. No, All-SEC. First team, I thought he was first. I'm wrong. Nathan's right. I apologize. Either way, I could definitely see that the young players on defense that are going to get more reps than they would in a regular season game, especially like Owen Pappo, maybe come away with maybe 2 sacks in a game or a sack and a half. I can see that happening. Obviously, Derek Brown's just too much of a given on that side of the ball. Marlon Davidson, I'm very excited to see who has a bigger game because this is kind of like the final showdown for them, right? The final countdown. And so that's going to be really exciting. On the offensive side of the ball, I like Seth Williams a lot, but I want to say Sal Cannello because he has this really interesting trend of whenever games matter, he shows up. And he comes up with a big catch or a big play or a big block that he doesn't get called for an illegal screen. But either way, a difference maker when he feels like he needs to be. He's got that interesting almost clutch gene, if you will. So I want to put down Sal Cannello as my offensive X factor. If he gets going, that could be really interesting to see how him have Bo Nix have Schwartz, Seth Williams, and Sal Cannella all rolling in one game. I'd be interested to see how many yards Nick's could throw with that. So I'm just going to pass it to Christian now. X Factor Christian.
Okay, I'm actually going to go with the offensive line. I'm going to look at Nick Brahms. He's the one person who's going to be coming back next year. We thought we'd lose all 5, but Caleb Kim will be leaving. So Auburn's going to return Nick Brahms, and that'll be huge for him to have a good game going into next season, carry that momentum. Looking at the Minnesota side, I'm going to go with Tanner Morgan. He's had kind of an up and down year, but I think he really needs to show up and have a really big game for Minnesota to be able to come away with the victory.
All right, well, that is our preview of the Outback Bowl between the Auburn Tigers and the Minnesota Golden Gophers. We would like to say thank you to Tampa for hosting us. They've obviously got us all decked out. Stay tuned for more coverage that we'll have coming up. This is Hayden Desmond from Eagle Eye TV signing off.